Good morning. It is July 12 here in sunny, beautiful Phoenix. It is partly cloudy outside. Today, I'm reminded to do a David Lynch filmography, where we can expect Michael to talk endlessly about his films, with gold and sunshine all along the way. Everybody, have a great day! Thank you, David, for that amazing introduction to your own video. So this is the David Lynch filmography. If you guys have never heard of David Lynch or watched a David Lynch movie, I might spoil some stuff. So maybe watch some of his stuff and then come back to this video. But I'm just going to go from Eraserhead all the way to Inland Empire, talking about all of his movies, TV stuff, all that. And gonna get into spoilery stuff. So yeah, really excited. Basically, he started off painting, and one day he got the idea from looking at his paintings that if they moved, that would be a motion picture. So I'm gonna make a movie, right? So the first thing he did was like short films, stuff like that. You can actually watch those short films on the Criterion edition of Eraserhead, which I have right here. And this is, I think in America at least, the only Blu-ray you can get of Eraserhead is the Criterion edition. But no matter where you are, this is what you want to get, is this edition, because it's beautifully restored, 4K digital restoration, and plus it's got a lot of his short films that preceded the movie. I haven't seen all of his short films, but the one I have seen is Six Men Getting Sick. And that one, I think that's his first short film, and that one is super fucked up, really gross. It's literally what it says. It's a painting of 6 people, and then paint starts running out of their mouth. They're throwing up, and that's the short. And Eraserhead is like a short film, an experimental short film, but it's feature length. So you got to be kind of down for a lot of really weird metaphorical shit, things that don't make sense. In order to get into any David Lynch film, but especially Eraserhead. Eraserhead is the most Lynchian of the David Lynch films. And that's what I love about it. It's not my favorite David Lynch movie. I know a lot of people say it is. Stanley Kubrick, actually, when he was filming The Shining, he was such a huge fan of Eraserhead. So to get all the cast in like a weird frame of mind, he would make them watch Eraserhead every day before they started filming. And it's easy to see why this movie does put you in a really weird state. I interpret this movie as kind of a fear of fatherhood, because basically you have Jack Nance, and he's playing the titular Eraserhead. And he is with a girl that he's not quite 100% all in on, because he sees the girl across the hallway. She's pretty, he's thinking thoughts he probably shouldn't be thinking while you're with somebody. She gets pregnant, the baby is born premature, and it's kind of like this little evil calf, like baby calf looking baby thing, and it keeps him up all night, drives him crazy. He kills the baby, and it's fucking wild. There's a lady in the radiator that sings to him. It's extremely surreal. It's kind of scary. I remember the first time I saw this movie, I was like, that was fucking weird, and then I went to bed and I just was hearing the baby thing crying in my head, and I'm like, that movie was a lot more fucked up than I realized. But it's a great movie. Again, with all of Lynch's stuff, there's what you're seeing, and then there's what it's making you think, and what that movie's about. You really have to interpret for yourself. It's not gonna, it doesn't hold your hand, and also you can't just go looking up like, what did David Lynch say this movie is about? Because most of the time, the movie is just whatever Lynch wants to do, and he'll tell you, hey, whatever you make of it. And that's kind of the true art of his movies. Is it's like looking at a painting. The painter's not always going to be there to be like, well, this green line means this and this and this and this. You got to sit there, you got to look at it, and you got to be like, okay, what does this mean? I found a lot of times when interpreting Lynch's stuff, a lot of it seems to be pretty like literal. If you think about what you're literally seeing on screen, that's probably what it represents. So anyways, this is the first of his movie. This kind of, it gets you off the ground running. Like, if you can speak the language of this movie, so to speak, you can pretty much speak the language of all of his other movies. So, one more fun fact. I think it took him like 4 years to film this movie. So Jack Nance had to keep that same haircut for like 4 or 5 years. And he said that he didn't have a single girlfriend the entire time he was filming the movie. And it's because he has a fucking Eraserhead. So he makes that movie. Then actually Mel Brooks, oddly enough, was auditioning directors for his. He was producing an Elephant Man movie based on John Merrick's life and stuff like that. And so David Lynch, he had made his first short film. He's kind of like, I want to get into the Hollywood circuit. So he makes The Elephant Man. The Elephant Man is really, really great. Anthony Hopkins, amazing performance. I think he won an Oscar for it. And John Hurt, he actually plays John Merrick, the Elephant Man. This is just kind of about the last few months of the Elephant Man's life. It's not super Lynchian, though. This is more average. Not average, because it's a great movie, but this is made like a real movie. It's not like a David Lynch art piece. This is a plot from A to B, and there's not a whole lot to interpret. It opens really weird when it starts. It's got a bunch of stock footage of elephants and space, and you're like, what the fuck? This is Eraserhead Part 2, and then it quickly gets very normal again. It's a great movie. I think it's an all-time best. I loved it. My only thing about this movie is, any director realistically could have made this movie. With how great the screenplay is, and the acting, all that kind of stuff, any director could. This doesn't have David Lynch's voice. If you were to watch this movie not knowing it's a Lynch film, you wouldn't guess it. So I do love this movie, but I kind of put my David Lynch movies in two categories, and I'll kind of get more into there. There's the normal David Lynch for normal people, and then there's the David Lynch for art snobs and movie critics and people like me. So this would be more in just the normal people's David Lynch. But it is a great movie. After that, he's taken another crack at the studio efforts. He got pretty much full creative control on that. Mel Brooks really loved him after interviewing him, meeting with him, and hiring him. So he's like, yeah, man, make your movie. So he did. That was not the case, though, with his next movie, Dune. And Dune is a trip. Dune, it's hard to classify kind of where this falls in my David Lynch ranking. Because on the one hand, you have a really interesting space movie with an interesting plot. But on the other hand, there's a lot of weird stuff and weird choices that it's like, I'm not sure if that was Lynch's choice or the studio's choice. Behind Lynch's back, the studio went and recut a bunch of stuff. To the point where he didn't want his name on the movie initially. He wanted to be credited as Alan Smithy, so people wouldn't know it was a David Lynch movie. The big thing for me that takes this movie down is I love a good space movie, and visually this movie's really cool. It's got a lot of really weird creatures and stuff like that. It's Star Wars by way of David Lynch, essentially, which oddly enough he was actually offered to do Return of the Jedi after making this movie. He turned it down because he didn't want to make another space movie, and he didn't want to be under the gun of the studios. From here on, David Lynch only made David Lynch movies. But the big thing that is a detractor for me with this film is just the fact that when you have characters and they'll talk to each other and they'll be like, I'm very angry at you, but then you hear their inner thoughts. And their inner thoughts, that might be interesting if it was to bring a whole new level, but most of the time it's like, I was very angry at him. And it's like, well, no fucking shit, Sherlock, you just said that. So that was my big detractor for this movie, was the inner thoughts that are played as narration. I liked it when it added to the story, but most of the time I would tell you it doesn't add anything. So that's pretty much Dune. Again, great special effects, decent movie, but as a David Lynch film, I feel like it kind of fails. After that, he made Blue Velvet. Now, Blue Velvet, I can't decide between this and a couple others, but it might be my favorite of the David Lynch movies. This movie is David Lynch being David Lynch, and it's not crazy over the ledge like Eraserhead or things like that. But it does have its very surreal, very dreamy moments. But you have Kyle MacLachlan. This is the second time he worked with David Lynch. The first time was on Dune. And he's your lead, and then you've got Laura Dern, the girl he meets, and then they end up sneaking into this apartment he ends up sneaking into this apartment of Isabel Rossellini, where he sees her being violently attacked, verbally and sexually, by Dennis Hopper. And the whole kind of point and metaphor of the movie, at least as I interpret it, is, there's two sides, there's two faces of society. There's the white picket fences and blue skies, which, the movie opens on, and then there's the underbelly of all the gross and hateful shit that happens in the world. And when Kyle MacLachlan, as a character, when he starts this movie, you know, he's an innocent, normal guy. He's walking through a field and there's a severed ear in the field. And he was like, I want to investigate this. And then through that investigation, he sees the horror of the real world, essentially. So, you know, David Lynch films are a lot about like balance and stuff like that. And this movie's really, really cool because you do get that balance. Like for every scene that's really hard to watch and violent and profane, there's a lot of just scenes of beauty, and there's beautiful music, and you know, you have characters falling in love and things like that. So this movie is great because it is so well balanced. It's got a great soundtrack. Dennis Hopper in like an all-time best performance. I would say if you only see one David Lynch movie to determine how you feel about his stuff, this is a really happy medium because it's got the really weird dreamy shit, but it's also got a great story. It's not that hard to follow, and I love the way this movie ends. You know, you have like in the beginning of the movie, you see these bugs on the ground and all this stuff. After it shows blue skies, and then it pans down, you see the green grass, and then all the bugs underneath. And that shot it sets up the entire movie, right? But the ending of the movie, you have this bird fly in, grab a bug, and eat it, and that's the last shot of the movie, as I remember at least. And you know, it's kind of that corny, like love conquers all kind of thing, but it's not in your face. It's just, you know, that for the movie to open with that shot and then end with a shot like that, I think really sandwiches it, makes it a great movie. So you got to watch this movie if you haven't. If you haven't seen it, you probably shouldn't be watching this video where I'm spoiling the shit out of the whole movie. But definitely, Blue Velvet's a great, great movie. So after that, my boy David Lynch went ahead and made, oh god, I think Wild at Heart was next. Let me look at my dates. I probably should have prepared more for this video. Let's see, 1990 versus, oh god, 1990. So around the same time, right? Okay, let's say, I think Twin Peaks he started working on first, because this is a TV series. Now, I could do a whole fucking video about Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks kind of continues that feeling that David Lynch brought in Blue Velvet. You have Kyle MacLachlan again. He's actually a detective in this, not just an amateur sleuth like he is in Blue Velvet. Basically, this girl, this kind of like town sweetheart, Laura Palmer, she washes up on shore dead, and it kind of corrupts the whole town from there after she dies. So the TV series is like this ongoing investigation, but it's David Lynch, so everything gets really weird and metaphorical. You have places that take place in like this dreamy red room with a little person who's speaking backwards and talking about Garmin Bozia, and it's fucking crazy, but it's also amazing. This whole series I kind of interpret as a commentary on TV itself, and just that kind of idea that, like, you know, TV is great, but it's also, there's a lot of violence in there, and, you know, without violence, we don't really watch TV, because if we're not watching some kind of struggle or conflict, what are we watching? You know what I mean? Like, nobody tunes in on the TV to watch two happy people eat dinner. But if two happy people eat dinner and then one of them gets stabbed, that makes for an interesting show that we'd want to watch, right? So that's kind of the commentary, as I interpret it, of Twin Peaks. Again, this is an entire series. There's a lot of other things going on, but if I was to sum up the theme of Twin Peaks, that's how I would sum it up. There's a million other things going on in this show. It's got some of the greatest moments of horror ever televised. And Season 3, Twin Peaks: The Return, which as of recording this in 2021 is the last piece of David Lynch film that we've got, aside from his weather reports on his YouTube channel. One of the best series of TV, but also one of the just most like densely compacted with shit to unpack. It's really, really good. I recommend everybody watch it. Everybody should give it a try. Out of everybody who watches it, 60% will love it. The other 40% will be scratching their heads and probably want to watch Modern Family instead. But I fucking love it. And to go with Twin Peaks, he made Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which delves further into the Laura Palmer story and is told from her perspective. This one is, you know, it's a movie, so it's got a lot of like really crazy hardcore shit. I'm only talking about it in the same breath, even though it was released after Wild at Heart, but just so we can talk about all things Twin Peaks. Really, really great movie, though. Lots of shots in this movie that I will never forget. The soundtrack is one of my favorites of all time. Angelo Badalamenti, He works with David Lynch on a lot of his projects, but I think his music here is some of the best like scored music I've ever heard in my life. So backtrack a little. Right before Twin Peaks premiered, David Lynch brought us Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart is a David Lynch film that I have a lot of complicated feelings about. On one hand, it's great, and on the other hand, there's a lot of shit that I don't understand, and I want to say is great, but just comes off very messy to me. And I need to watch it a second time. That's the only thing I can tell you. The first time, I think I was expecting something totally different. Basically, the way I interpret this movie is you have the concept of like the Wizard of Oz, right? In the Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland, she goes to sleep in normal America, and in her dream, she's in this fantastical dream world, with all this crazy shit. This is kind of that, where you have these two lovers, Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern, and fuck, they get together, they start their dream trip together, but as soon as they do that, they're kind of like your normal, like, stereotypical 50s couple in love, very sitcom-y and stuff like that, but as soon as they get on the road, they're exposed to the crazy shit and the underbelly of America, kind of like, we discovered with Blue Velvet. It's almost like if their dream world, in The Wizard of Oz, it's this dream world, but here it's like the world of a Tarantino movie. Everything's really violent. Everybody wants to kill each other. There's hate behind every door. And this movie, again, it's a lot to unpack. I feel like this movie it's pretty normal, but at the same time, I have a hard time grasping a lot of the concepts that are within it. But yeah, Wild at Heart, need to watch again before I can give you guys a really good retrospective on. But definitely a great movie. I love the use of Wicked Game by Chris Isaak in it. That's one of my favorite scenes of all time, when he's driving in the dark and that song is playing. And then they get stumbled upon with Willem Dafoe, and shit only gets wilder from there because it's Willem Dafoe. All right, so next we have he made Lost Highway, right? Yeah. This movie I've done a review on my channel, so I'm not going to go super hard in depth, but I think this might be my favorite David Lynch film. This movie is David Lynch by way of David Fincher, kind of. It reminds me of David Fincher's shooting style with movies like Fight Club and Seven. It has that same kind of feeling. This movie also has a great soundtrack, but a very of its time soundtrack. In the same, but to that also, not in a bad way. I've heard other people be like, oh, it's dated because the 90s actors in it and like the soundtrack, but I think it's really cool to, have songs by like Rammstein and stuff like that in a David Lynch movie, especially. It's really unexpected. If you've watched my short film that I posted earlier on my channel, Noctophobia, my whole idea for this one scene in the movie where, you have this beautiful 50s music and then on a dime it turns into hardcore death metal, I actually kind of stole that idea from Lost Highway, because Lost Highway does shit like that a lot, where you'll have kind of a calm scene and you're not expecting it, especially have a David Lynch movie, but randomly you just hear the fucking shrieking guitars and yelling from a Rammstein song, and it's just like, it's like whiplash, but it works because that's what the movie's trying to convey. So Lost Highway is very, very cool. I love the performance by Robert Blake. He's great in this movie. Unfortunately, he is a horrible person in real life. He killed his wife. But when you know that and then you watch him in this movie, it makes his performance that much creepier because he's such a heinous villain in the movie, and then you know who he is in real life. So I actually think it lends itself to making for a better performance for Lost Highway. That might be my favorite Lynch film. Then, I don't have this one on physical copy yet because it's very hard to find in Blu-ray in America. But when it does, I think there's an Australian release coming out that I might pick up if the price drops. But next, David Lynch makes The Straight Story. In my opinion, that is a very boring movie, but it's boring because that's the point. You're watching a guy drive a tractor across the country to get to see his brother. And the point of the movie is you're going to sit here and watch the painstaking trip that he takes, because it pays off in the end when you've had this journey with this character, and he goes and he knocks on his brother's door. His brother is played by Harry Dean Stanton, and the reason he's going is because Harry Dean Stanton had a stroke and they don't really talk anymore and stuff like that. So when his brother has a stroke, he's like, okay, I got to go see him. And so the kind of really powerful point of the movie is once he gets there, you know, his brother's like, how long did you drive? And he's like, you know, however long it was, and he was like a month or so. And his brother just starts crying, and the movie ends there, you know, because it's like this beautiful thing, like, you know, family, like, we fight, we turn on each other and stuff like that, but like in times of need, you're always there for your family and, you know, your people. And so like that's this kind of great point that the movie makes, is like, as an audience member, you're kind of shifting in your seat, like, oh man, I'm gonna watch this fucking tractor movie for 2 hours. Like, what's the point? But then you realize the point all along is like, no, he needs to go see that. He needs to go see his brother, and like they need to work on themselves, stuff like that. So it's a really great movie. Probably one that I'd only watch once because I saw it. I got the point. I don't know how apt I am to be watching a 2 hour tractor movie all the time, but it is a great film. After I should mention, it's also not Lynchian at all. It's called The Straight Story, and it is a straight story. There's not a whole lot of weird dreamlike shit. There's some kind of clever, quirky David Lynch dialogue, but overall, pretty normal. Then, Mulholland Drive in 2001. Now, David Lynch actually made Mulholland Drive with the intent of being a TV series like Twin Peaks. So, actually, I think on the Blu-ray, potentially, or you can find it on YouTube as well, but there's the kind of TV pilot version of the movie that was pitched. Didn't get picked up, so David Lynch just filmed additional scenes to fill it out as a full movie. 2.5 hours. On days when I tell you that Lost Highways isn't my favorite David Lynch movie, Mulholland Drive is my favorite David Lynch movie. This movie starts right off the bat with one of my favorite sequences ever fucking filmed, where you have this guy in a diner talking about this nightmare that he had. They're inside of a Denny's, and he's talking about this nightmare that he had, and he wants to go out in the back of the Denny's to like prove to himself that the nightmare's not real, because in the nightmare he goes behind there, and behind the dumpster is this like demon. And so it's one of the most tense scenes ever, because he's slowly walking to that trash can, and the music all just goes really like, how do I describe it? Just really like suspenseful, like not like bump 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 music, but it's just like really like droney, you know, and you're not quite sure if it's going to be nothing or it's going to be what he saw in his nightmare. And then you have one of the greatest jump scares of all time, because it's a jump scare with no sound. I've never seen that fucking done before, but everything just mutes out, and you're not expecting anything, and then it shows it, and homeboy fucking has a heart attack, and I almost do too. It's great. This movie is fucking fantastic. I consider this movie a commentary on like the Hollywood dream. You know, again, it's about David Lynch balance. There's our Hollywood dream, and then there's the gross, heinous shit that actually goes on in Hollywood. And that's the dichotomy of this film. It's really real, really surreal, really dreamlike. But it's, to me, this is David Lynch's absolute top of his game, absolute best. A lot of the stuff that he was setting up in Lost Highway in terms of themes, he really pays off in this movie. This is one, even for its length, I could probably rewatch it more endlessly than the others, because it's just such a great film in that every scene you remember. You know, my wife and I were talking the other day, and like, you know a great movie if you've only seen it once, but you can recite it from A to B, because it really, everything about it stuck with you. Now, you know, if I watch a fucking random B movie on TV, I might have fun. 2 weeks later, if you ask me what the plot was, I don't fucking know. But, you know, I've only seen all these David Lynch movies once, with the exception of Eraserhead, I've seen twice. But here I am reciting them from memory. And, you know, I've watched them years ago at this point. In a couple of years, I started getting into his stuff. So that shows the strength of his films. They really stick with you. And I love the fact that he makes them so metaphorical and artsy-fartsy, because it gives you something to revisit. You're like, was my first interpretation correct? You know, like, and there's not hard answers online. This is what this means and stuff like that, because, you know, that kind of spoils the mystery. You know, that comes down to a lot of, like, with Twin Peaks, a big theme in the show is like, once we solve who killed Laura Palmer, does anybody care about Laura Palmer? You know? And, you know, famously, the studio told David Lynch, you got to solve it. He solves it in the second season. And immediately after, the show takes a huge dive in quality, because that mystery is solved. We've all moved on. And, you know, that can be said about all of his films. If there was ever a point where David Lynch is like, Eraserhead meant this, you know, Mulholland Drive meant this, Lost Highway meant this, then there's nothing to interpret. The conversation is dead, you know? But that's what makes his films and art so great, is endlessly, you know, we can walk up to a fucking Jackson Pollock and be like, what does this mean, you know? And that's another thing that's great about Lynch, is what does this mean? Forever we're going to be doing that. So His last movie, speaking of what the fuck does this mean, Inland Empire is an absolute fucking nightmare. I kind of interpret it as a sequel to Mulholland Drive. I may be totally alone on that. But, you know, the concept of this movie is Laura Dern is an actress, and she's starring in a remake of a movie that is supposedly cursed, and things get really weird from there. I think a lot of this movie is about remake culture and reincarnation, and also what it means to be the kind of Hollywood horror. You know, people who will do anything for money are remakes kind of horrorish in that way. So they all really connect in that way. My interpretation, this movie is extremely loose. You could make just about anything of it because so much of it is so plotting and just what the fuck am I watching? There's scenes with rabbits that are in a sitcom. You have Laura Dern's face projected on her own face, puking up blood. She's a prostitute for a little bit of it. It's a fucking train wreck, but I watched all 3 hours of it, totally captivated. I do feel like this movie's kind of a sequel to Mulholland Drive. I might have said that already. And I think that you can say it's even connected to the Twin Peaks universe because the ending of the movie, when it's doing the end credits, you see the brunette from Mulholland Drive. I forget her name in real life. She's sitting in the chair across from her in what looks to be kind of like a red room. And in that red room is a monkey, and it looks like the same monkey that says Judy in the Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me movie. If you've seen all these movies, please tell me. Am I correct? What is your interpretation? But it's really cool that this is David Lynch's last movie because it does feel like just a big... To finish up my thought on Inland Empire, I think the whole thing is a big fuck you to Hollywood. Now, what happened just now with that weird cut? Totally open to interpretation. Very Lynchian, right? Actually, let's not interpret it. Let's tell the truth. My camera died while I was filming because it heard me talking about David Lynch for 30 minutes and it fucking killed itself. So anyways, I'm going to take that as a hint. I'll stop talking. I'll leave. But everybody have a great night. That is my David Lynch retrospective. Party on, Wayne. Have a week and drive safe.